The afternoon sun lingered just above the Pacific horizon, painting the sky in molten gold and rose hues. Antonio stepped onto the broad veranda of the seaside villa, his heart fluttering with the familiar thrill of anticipation. He had agreed to attend one more high-profile party, an event he neither desired nor needed, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. The gentle murmur of conversation drifted through the open windows, mingling with the distant roar of waves. He paused to adjust his jacket, inhaling the salty breeze that carried the promise of a perfect evening. Inside, the grand room was a soft whirl of crystal chandeliers and glimmering dresses. Yet, amid the glitter and chatter, Antonio's attention was drawn to a single figure standing by an arched window that framed the ocean's expanse. She faced the horizon as though seeking solace there, her silhouette defined by the sun's dying light. Melanie's golden hair, loose around her shoulders, caught the final rays and glowed like embers against the twilight. He watched her for a moment, noting the subtle tension in her posture, the way she cradled a slender glass of champagne as if it were a lifeline. Compelled by a force he could not name, Antonio crossed the marble floor. With each step, his breath steadied, and the world around them seemed to slow. He finally reached her side and offered a gentle nod. She turned, and their eyes met. Hers a luminous green flecked with curiosity. His a warm brown shaped by years of laughter and loss. In that instant, the noise of the party faded, and only the hum of their shared heartbeat remained. "Beautiful evening," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. She smiled, a fleeting curve that carried both relief and surprise. "It's as if the sky is made just for us tonight." Their conversation began in simple notes, where they were from, how many sunsets they had watched in Los Angeles. His Spanish accent wove through her English responses like a melody. And soon, they were swapping stories of childhood dreams and near-miss roles, of fleeting romances and the loneliness that follows applause. Each revelation built an unspoken bridge between them. She spoke of her love for literature and long drives along Highway 1. He confessed his passion for flamenco music and the ache of filming away from home. As darkness settled, the veranda lights blinked on, casting a warm glow over the terrace's potted palms. Antonio gestured toward a pair of wrought iron chairs set just beyond the guests, overlooking the endless surf. "Shall we?" he asked. Melanie nodded, and they slipped away from the crowd, their laughter trailing like soft echoes. They sat side by side, silent at first, watching how the waves caught the moonlight. Then she spoke again, this time more quietly, as though trusting him with her hidden truths. In the hush between words, Antonio sensed the faint tremor of something unsaid, a memory she carried, a choice she once made. Yet instead of retreating, he offered her his genuine attention, the kind born of understanding rather than fame. When the host's distant voice drifted across the terrace, announcing fresh hors d'oeuvres, they barely noticed. Instead, Antonio reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a small gesture, intimate and unguarded. Melanie turned to look at him, her pupils dark with emotion. The moment stretched, balanced precariously between hope and hesitation. They rose together as if drawn by the same silent cue, swept back into the golden current of the party. Yet, neither forgot the space they had carved out on the edge of the terrace, two souls temporarily freed from the demands of the world, united by the delicate magic of a sunset. Unbeknownst to them, this meeting would ignite a connection destined to carry them through months of laughter, doubt, and secrets, until the day when a single truth would unravel everything. But for now, as Antonio escorted Melanie back into the glow of festooned lights and music, neither could foresee the shadows that lurked beyond the next act of their unfolding story. In the weeks that followed their sunset encounter, Antonio and Melanie's bond deepened with almost intoxicating speed. Mornings began with texts that felt like secret love letters. Evenings dissolved into candlelit dinners that stretched past midnight. And stolen moments were woven into the cluttered schedules of film sets and press events. Yet beneath the exhilarating rush, Antonio began to sense a subtle shift, small tremors in the foundation of their burgeoning trust. It started with the phone. Melanie's device, once casually set on the table during lunches, now remained tucked inside her purse or slipped into the depths of her designer tote. At first, Antonio convinced himself it was courtesy, an effort to be present in each other's company, but the glances she cast whenever it buzzed were sharp enough to cut tension through the space between them. He noticed her pause mid-laugh, eyes flicking distant, as though a private conversation echoed in her mind. When he reached to touch her hand, she drew away, not abruptly, but just enough to let him know she was occupied by something he could not yet share. On film sets, where they both worked irregular hours, their routines should have aligned effortlessly. Yet Melanie began arriving late, her hair slightly mussed, makeup hurried, claiming traffic snarls or last-minute script rewrites. Antonio, accustomed to her punctual elegance, found himself waiting under harsh studio lights, rehearsing lines alone, while she slipped into her role with professional ease. He watched as she exchanged quick hushed words with her assistant, laughter brittle and strained, before turning to him with that signature warm smile that now felt somehow rehearsed. Private texts, too, grew sparse and coded, where once she sent paragraphs about her day, she now responded with clipped phrases. Busy, can't talk, on set. Antonio's own messages began morphing into questions framed as concern. Are you okay? Miss you. But there was a hesitation in Melanie's replies, a polite distance that made his heart thump with dread. He remembered how, at sunset, she had leaned into him without reservation. Now she leaned away at the slightest sign of intimacy. Then there was the unusual generosity of her schedule, sudden invitations to dinner with old friends, long weekends with family, trips she insisted were good for the soul. Antonio uncovered the ejector seats in his mind. His protective instincts urged him to ask, to demand clarity, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the fear of proving himself paranoid, of shattering the fragile beauty of their romance. Instead, he clung to each smile she offered, each moment of genuine warmth, hoping they would outweigh the shadows. Late one evening, he tracked her to a quiet bistro on Sunset Boulevard. He saw her through the tinted window, seated across from a man whose back was turned, their conversation animated, the stranger's hand brushing hers as they laughed. Antonio's throat tightened. He contemplated bursting in, confronting them both, but paused, hesitation anchored by disbelief. Melanie had never lied to him, had she? But now, the simplest truth felt buried beneath unspoken doubts. He retreated before she noticed, slipping into the night with the sea breeze at his back, haunted by the sight of her laughter with someone else. On the drive home, the headlights painted her image against his memory, that tender smile at sunset, the soft glow of hope in her eyes. In the rearview mirror, he saw doubt taking shape, silhouettes of secrets gathering, ready to rise and claim their story. Antonio arrived at his empty apartment and sank onto the sofa, heart pounding in the hush. He realized that love, as intoxicating as it was, could blind a man to the clarion warnings appearing in every stolen glance and every hurried goodbye. And so, he resolved in the dark to watch more closely, to seek the truth behind Melanie's fading presence in his life, even if it meant confronting a betrayal he dared not yet name. Antonio's resolve to uncover the truth led him back to the bistro on Sunset Boulevard the following evening. As twilight descended, the neon signs flickered to life, casting garish hues across the wet pavement. He lingered at a distance, heart pounding like a drum in his ears, watching Melanie slip through the door. With her was the same man, tall, dark-haired, and easy in posture. A stranger whose familiar touch Antonio now recognized as an intrusion. She greeted him with a warm smile, but as the two exchanged embraces, the light in her eyes dimmed at the sight of Antonio's shadow looming at the window. Panic flickered across her face. She rose and moved toward the door, but he blocked her path with unspoken accusation. Inside, the stranger sat rigid, sensing the tension. Antonio pushed past Melanie without a word and seated himself across from the man. He glanced at Melanie, her cheeks flushed, hands trembling around her water glass, and then addressed the stranger. "Who are you?" The man studied him curiously, then extended a calm hand. "I'm Jack Harris." Antonio looked to Melanie, whose eyes shone with tears she could no longer conceal. "Jack and I have history," she stammered. "It was before you and I—" "But the tickets," Antonio interrupted, his voice tight with hurt. "2 months ago, you booked a flight to New York. You lied about it." Melanie's face crumpled. "I know it looks bad. I'm sorry I was secretive. You remember how lost I felt after Paris, how I didn't know who I was anymore." Jack found me at my lowest. We reconnected. Jack nodded, voice measured. I didn't want to hurt you or Antonio. I thought if I could help Melanie heal, everything would go back to normal. Antonio pressed his palm against the table, feeling its cold grain beneath his knuckles. His mind replayed the early weeks of their romance. Gentle kisses under citrus trees, whispered promises in dark hallways. The way her laughter had seemed to resonate with the sincerity of a bond he believed unbreakable. Now, every memory resonated with an undertone of deception. "Why hide him?" Antonio asked, voice barely above a whisper. Melanie looked down, wrapping her fingers around her glass. "I was terrified. Terrified of losing you. Terrified of admitting She paused, swallowing. "I still love you, Antonio, but I wasn't honest about my past." Silence stretched between them, thick and accusing. Antonio's chest felt hollow. "You chose to lie instead of trust me," he said. Tears rolled down Melanie's cheeks. "I thought I was protecting you, and me." Jack rose quietly and slipped away into the night, leaving the two alone amid half-empty tables and the clattering of dishes. Antonio traced a finger on the condensation of Melanie's glass, watching the droplets bead and blur. The world seemed to wait for his next move. Finally, he stood. "I came here for the truth. I have it now." His gaze locked onto hers, fierce yet mournful. "You broke the promise we made to each other." Melanie reached out, but he stepped back. "I need time," he said. "Time to decide if forgiveness is enough to rebuild what was shattered." He walked out into the neon glow without looking back. The air was cool, and the distant roar of traffic sounded like a requiem. Melanie remained inside, head bowed, staring at the empty chair across from her. Behind her, the bistro's lights continued to flicker, oblivious to the heartbreak they had illuminated. As Antonio's silhouette disappeared down the boulevard, he realized that some betrayals could not be erased by apologies. Yet, somewhere in his chest, a quiet ember of hope burned. Perhaps, with time and honesty, even the deepest wounds could learn to heal. But in that moment, all he felt was the sting of betrayal and the weight of a love that had faltered under the weight of unspoken truths. The early morning light filtered through half-closed blinds, casting pale stripes across Antonio's suitcase, which lay open on the floor of his apartment. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, breathing in the hush of dawn. The city below was stirring, delivery trucks humming down side streets, baristas flicking on neon signs, but his world felt suspended, caught between the memory of Melanie's tears and an uncertain future. Over the previous weeks, he had thrown himself into work, long days on set, late-night editing sessions, and impromptu meetings with directors. Each momentary distraction offered a reprieve from the ache in his chest, yet every quiet pause reminded him of the empty space beside him. In emails and calls, Melanie apologized again and again, her words sincere but unable to bridge the gulf her secrecy had created. Antonio read them, nodded at night, then folded them away, uncertain whether forgiveness could ever feel the same as trust. One afternoon, he found himself back on the terrace of the seaside villa where they first met. The iron chairs stood alone, overlooking the restless ocean. He sat down, recalling how, on that first night, they had spoken of dreams and fears under a sky streaked with pink and gold. Now the sky was a neutral gray, and the only sounds were the rhythmic crash of waves and his own muted heartbeat. He closed his eyes, letting the memory of her warmth wash over him, then exhaled, feeling the weight of what had passed slip from his shoulders. Meanwhile, Melanie wandered the corridors of an art gallery in downtown Los Angeles, her footsteps echoing through echoing hall rooms filled with vivid canvases. She paused before a painting of fractured glass lit from within, a fractured reflection of her own heart. The artist's note described the piece as "the beauty born of brokenness," and she pressed her palm against the smooth surface, willing herself to believe in renewal. She thought of Antonio's final words that night. Time to decide if forgiveness is enough. Time, she realized, was both her opportunity and her reckoning. Over the next weeks, their lives ran on parallel courses. Antonio accepted an invitation to film in Barcelona, a project that would demand his full attention, but would also place miles of ocean between him and Melanie. Before he left, he drafted a letter he could scarcely bring himself to send. In it, He thanked her for the gifts of their time together, her laughter that felt like sunlight, her compassion that once soothed his anxieties, and confessed that his heart was not yet ready to trust again. He folded the letter neatly, left it on his desk, and walked away without looking back. Melanie, too, made her decision. She packaged her apology in a small journal filled with honest reflections. The reasons she had hidden her past, the guilt that had driven her into silence, and the love she still carried for Antonio. She left it on his doorstep one evening, accompanied by a single sunflower, Antonio's favorite, knowing it might wither before he returned. Months passed. Antonio's work in Europe stretched into seasons of dust and dawns in foreign studios. He forged new friendships, rediscovered his passion for storytelling, and felt the edge of his grief dull into something softer, gratitude for what had been, rather than regret for what was lost. Melanie threw herself into her writing, her voice emerging clearer and more authentic than ever before. In interviews, she spoke openly about renewal and the courage to face one's flaws. On a crisp autumn morning, Antonio stepped off a train in Santa Monica, his gaze drawn instinctively to the ocean. He wandered toward the old terrace, now bathed in gentle sunlight, and spotted a single sunflower in a glass vase on the table. Next to it lay Melanie's journal. He lifted the delicate pages, reading her truth as the breeze toyed with the petals. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, whether their paths would converge once more or continue their separate journeys. But as he stood there, journal in hand, he felt hope stir within him. Hope that two people, fractured by mistrust yet bound by genuine care, could one day find their way back to each other, stronger, wiser, and guided by the simple courage of honesty. And so, with the ocean's breath at his feet and the sunflower's promise in his grasp, Antonio walked toward the horizon, ready to follow his own path, wherever it might lead.